I am the Great Gatsby and I am a wizard. Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews and to another video here on the channel. Today we are doing my May wrap up. That is the month that we are just finishing, Bank Holiday Monday when I'm filming this. If you can hear the washing machine, I'm sorry. Katie and I have just got back from visiting my parents up in the north, so we've had a very lovely time and I am riding high on the energy from seeing somewhere other than my house. It's been miraculous. So I thought I would share with you all the things that I have read this month. I don't know if this video is going up this Thursday or the Thursday after, so we may be a fair way into June by the time you're watching this, but it's by the by. Let me tell you everything I read. I have wet hair. Don't worry about it. So I'm going to use that word, I consumed 20 things this month, which is different from saying I read 20 books this month, because not everything was a full-length book or even a novella, and not everything I read, some things I did via audiobook, but it sort of all balances out to being 20 average-sized things at the end of the day. Without further ado, I'm going to go in chronological order. I'm going to try and pull things out of this haphazard pile I made when I came in the door, and we'll see how far we get. The first thing that I finished in May was The Ones We're Meant to Find by Nghi. This is a sort of sci-fi, futuristic, emotional, weird kind of book. So we have two narratives. We have two sisters. We have one, and I don't even remember their names. That's how long ago this was for me. But one of them is on a deserted island trying to survive and trying to build a boat to escape, and weird things are happening. And the other one is in this futuristic city where it's an eco-city, so if you or your family in the past were good ecologically, you get to live in the city and have a wonderful time, free from earthquakes and such, and everyone who's bad, if your family was in the oil industry, for example, you don't get to live there, and everyone works on a ranking system, and there's a lot of ideas involved, but essentially that sister wants to find her other sister who's gone missing. A weird one, and I don't actually want to talk to you too much about it, because if you do want to read this, my best advice is to go in knowing absolutely nothing. Don't expect anything, don't look anything up, barely listen to what I'm saying now, go in knowing nothing, because I think that's the best way to experience this book. If you do want to know about it, if you do want to know my thoughts, let me know and I will maybe do a video with some spoilery thoughts towards the end. I liked it a lot more than I liked Descendant of the Crane. They are very, very different books, and this one won't be for everyone, but I personally found it much more compelling and just very engaging and an interesting story. Yeah, it went to places I would never have expected, which is always good in my book. Gosh, these feel like simultaneously a really long time ago, and also like I read them last week. Havenfall by Sara Holland. This is the first book in a series. The second one is already out. I think I found that in my vlog, but I haven't got to it and I don't know if I'm going to. So Havenfall features Maddie, who instead of going where her parents want her to go during the holidays, goes back to visit her uncle who runs an inn in Havenfall, which is essentially an inn where a whole bunch of realms meet. And over the years, various realms have opened up to there, but currently there are 3 and one that is closed off because it's where the bad things come from. And the concept of this book is good. The execution of it, I thought personally, was subpar, in that Maddie as a character felt kind of stupid, and that's maybe a little bit mean, but she felt a bit naive, and people were literally telling her who the bad guys were, and she was like, surely not. Surely they can't be the bad guys. And, you know, I have very little patience, as we will discover throughout this wrap-up, I have very little patience for characters who are willingly naive, and that was how Maddie felt to me. I liked a lot of elements about this, but overall I left it kind of going, eh. So maybe I'd be interested to read another one. Maybe, but I think I would get it from the library rather than buying it for myself. That's where I'm at on that at the moment. But nevertheless, glad to have read it, and certainly on the scale of like ever less I really liked, ever more I thought was terrible, Havenfall is more towards liked than terrible. After that, I read Threadneedle, which is another one that's had a fair amount of hype on the bookish internet, a lot of marketing being done behind it. I get Facebook adverts for it all the time. This, I went in with probably the wrong expectations in the sense that I thought it was historical. It's not, it's modern day as far as I'm aware. And it's kind of like again, unexpectedly, it's kind of a teenage girl revenge story in a lot of ways, which I like conceptually, because I think witchy teenage girl revenge stories are tropes for a reason and it's good fun. But again, I didn't love the voice of the main character. In this instance, she's naive for more believable reasons than in Havenfall. But yeah, I didn't love some of the places that it went to, and I think I talked about it in my vlog. This is a personal preference thing, but it goes to a place that I wasn't hugely comfortable with in terms of consent. And if you have read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, if that's something you're iffy on. I would maybe steer clear of it. It's dubious consent for sure. Overall, would I read the sequel? Again, if it fell into my lap or I got it from the library, yes. I don't think I would be seeking out the book to read again. As ever, my problem of there are finite numbers of books in the world that I can read. Do I want to read that book again? My answer is no. On to a book that I would read again. Another Whitten. Ugh, come hither. The House of Always by Jenn Lyons. This is the 4th book in the Chorus of Dragons series, and I love this series. I forget that I love it. I talk about it all the time, and yet somehow, whenever I haven't read them for a while, my brain goes, oh, those were complicated. You're too stupid to read those books and like them. But no, I do. I really enjoy them. They are complicated, weird narrative structure, but hugely character-focused fantasy, and there's a lot of interweaving storylines and all that stuff that I really enjoy. Do I think I probably would have got maybe more out of this if I'd reread the first 3? Yes. But there was absolutely no way that was going to happen before the release date, so here we are. I do want to film a video on this because I've got the video for the first 3 and I think it would be nice to continue it on, but who has the time? If you haven't read this series yet, as I say, it's a very complicated narrative structure. There's a lot of epic stuff happening, and in this case we have a whole bunch of characters in a lighthouse, which you'll be familiar with if you've read the series, but they're trapped there, but they're also trying to save their friend who is in another place. And that's probably all I can say without spoiling the previous books, but yeah, it's interesting. The author talks in her author's note about writing a book in isolation, about characters in isolation was really interesting, and I'll be fascinated to see how much that plays into future fiction in the next few years, where a lot of people have been writing over the pandemic. Interesting. But yes, I very much enjoyed this. I'm happy to be continuing that series. I'm excited for the next one. When does it end? I don't know. I assume there's one more part. 5 feels like the right amount, but I honestly don't know. Then I read Animorphs 21. I don't feel like I need to talk about that too much because there is a video up for that one. So if you're enjoying the Animorphs series, that continues. I did not manage to read Animorphs 22, which I was hoping to over this week. That's just gone for me. I didn't. It'll happen next month. After that, I read The Wolf and the Woodsman by Reid. This was actually a really anticipated read for me. I thought it was going to be really interesting, but oh no, let me talk about the book first. So we have a main character who is a wolf girl, in that she is brought up in this pagan society where the girls have magic and they wear wolf cloaks and they do their various kinds of magic, and every so often the woodsmen, who are kind of the king's army, turn up and take one of the girls away for whatever they don't know. And the start of the book, the main character does not have any magic. She is like the worst wolf girl, everyone hates her, she's miserable, and the woodsmen turn up and they're like, we would like a seer, but the wolf girl's person running everything says, I don't want to give them a seer, you can go instead, and we'll disguise you and you can pretend to be a proper wolf girl. So she heads off with the woodsman through the woods, and along the way realises that maybe this particular woodsman has other stuff going on, and turns out to, you know, have other things happening. As a concept, not terrible, and I really liked the Hungarian history and mythology that comes into it. The main character is half Jewish, which is really interesting as the way that plays into the story, and obviously Ava Reid's writing from her own knowledge and her own background there, which is very, very, very interesting. However, there is a lot of romance in this book that I was not on board for. Again, I've talked about it in the vlogs. If you've watched them, you'll know. I just found it a little bit insta-love-y and a little bit, why is this happening? I feel like this isn't something that you should be doing. This just feels silly. Can he possibly be that attractive? I did come to the realisation, you know, the main character in this sense isn't the 18-year-old that we've had in other stories. She's 25. So it feels less, you are but a silly young thing, and more like, okay, she's my age. What are we doing here? But even with that lens on it, I think I've come out just going, if that bit of the story hadn't been there, if it had just been, I am a person who needs help and I am a person who also needs help, can we work out our differences without even adding a romantic element to it? I think I probably would have liked it just the same, or even more, because I wouldn't have got annoyed at that romantic aspect. I liked a lot about it, but the fact that there was so much focus on the romance, for me personally, made the book less enjoyable. Then I read a book that crushed my soul and my emotions entirely. I finished Assassin's Fate, finally. It took me 2 months. But this is the final book in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, which is the fifth? I can't remember. The last set of books in the Realm of the Elderling series by Robin Hobb. And it's sort of like watching a character that you've literally watched grow up over the course of a bunch of books, and a whole bunch of other characters who you fell in love with in other trilogies, just all come together and then crush and rip out all of your emotions and stample on them, like trample and stamping, all over them. And I honestly cried for the full last hour of the audiobook, and then I cried for like another hour. So many feelings. just amazingly written. For me, as a person who doesn't particularly like Fitz as a main character, who's the main character of this bigger world, I didn't like him as a character, but I still sobbed at the ending. And Robin Hobb just creates such wonderful moments and handles the emotional tone of the book so well, and really takes you on a, surely at this point everything will be fine, surely we are at the happy ending, and then she'll just go like, nope, there's another 7 hours left, buckle up. And that was the emotional journey I went on with that one. I absolutely loved it, don't get me wrong, and I highly recommend reading the series if you haven't already. I'm not emotionally ready to read it again for a while. After that, I picked up The Tangleroot Palace by Marjorie Liu. This was another review copy that I had this month. This is a collection of short stories that ends in a kind of 50-page or so novella. The short stories, much like other collections, are from various points in Marjorie Liu's work, and a lot of them have this thread of a forest running through them. There's a couple of outliers. Most of the ones that were very fairy tale-esque, I really enjoyed. I liked the novella. There's one that's a kind of Briar Rose sort of story. There's one that features a duelist. They're quite queer. Those I really enjoyed. There was a sci-fi story in the middle that I wasn't such a huge fan of, and it didn't really feel like it fit. I understood it as a reference to Marjorie Liu's work in the comics industry, but I didn't think it fit with the rest of the collection, which was weird. The actual stories I personally thought were really good. I'd quite like to own it because I think the cover is beautiful. Might have to be a treat for myself. Maybe, yeah. I finished Wild Seed by Octavia Butler. Did I completely space out after taking too much algae medication by accident and forget to go to the book club for it? Yes, I did. Oops. But I did read this. This is the first book in the Patternist series by Octavia Butler. It's the first ever Octavia Butler I've ever read. I really, really liked it. I like her writing. It's very stripped back. It's very, does a lot with a little, is what I would say. And I really like the themes of this book. So we have these two immortals, one of whom sort of at the beginning of the book you feel like is starting to take advantage of the other, but then it becomes this, it's not even a cat and mouse game, but this sort of game between the two of them, and there's a lot of conflict and a lot of mismatching of ideas of what should and shouldn't happen. Again, I don't want to talk too much about this because this feels like something you should discover for yourself, but I'm really, really glad I picked this up, and I definitely wouldn't have picked it up if it hadn't been for that book club. So this is your sign to join a book club. I don't know whose. Speaking of book clubs, for Space Sirens, I also read The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. This I hadn't requested when the email came around from Orbit saying, you know, we have copies, would you like them? Because I looked at the cover and, to be fair, definitely judged a book by its cover and went, this feels very military. But it's not that military in this sense. She is a soldier, but it's more about espionage, and that I really enjoy, and the difficulty of being raised outside of your own culture and then going back and sort of having to try and subdue that culture, but then realising that maybe you don't want to be on that side anymore. There's a lot of stretched loyalties, and it's really, really interesting, and I very much thought it was well worth reading. I really liked it, and I'm excited for the second one, which is called, it does say so at the back, Magic of the Lost, which feels like an odd title, but you know, as they must. I would highly recommend this. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a really engaging story. It's really well edited. If you liked The Mask of Mirrors, actually just making the Orbit connection of Orbit books I really loved this year, Mask of Mirrors was great. This is on par, I would say, with that. It's slightly less convoluted, but it's still really, really good. Very different books, but both very good. After that, Justine over I Should Read That and I buddy read The Chosen and the Beautiful by Nevo. This is a Great Gatsby retelling, but in a slightly fantastical version of The Great Gatsby, where there's a bit of magic. Drink is called demoniac, and it actually includes demon essence, so there's an added layer to the prohibition stuff happening. I thought it was really good. I had to look up The Great Gatsby again because I'd forgotten who everyone was, but once I got my head around that and I knew where we were going, I thought it was very interesting. I think if you had absolutely no context for The Great Gatsby, it would not be as interesting a book. Because part of what's interesting about this is the things that are changed from the original, whereas if you just read this as a story, I don't know if it would be quite so compelling. But obviously I can't speak to that because I can't erase my knowledge of The Great Gatsby and then read it again. That's not going to happen. But yeah, the writing is absolutely stunning. Just the most gorgeous prose, and not too flowery. It's just, again, doing a lot with a little, and I would highly recommend it. I think particularly if the idea of The Great Gatsby interests you, it's a really good way of framing that story. If you go in expecting it to be very, very fantastical, you will be disappointed. It's not hugely fantasy based. There's just magic, and it's really more just another added layer to the fact that this whole world of wealth and opulence is a fantasy. It's not a case of like, I am the Great Gatsby and I am a wizard. It doesn't do that. After that, I was sewing one weekend and I needed an audiobook, so I was browsing Scribd as one does, and I saw that the Seep was on there, which was also on my TBR generally, so I thought I would pick it up. A couple of hours of audiobook, it was a good time. This is a very weird kind of conceptual, literary kind of book, but it's got a lot of story to it. So in this world, the alien invasion has come, but it's the gentlest alien invasion ever, and it basically just comes through and shows everybody you're all connected, everything's connected, and basically capitalism falls. Everyone's living their best life. They're modifying their bodies to grow antlers and stuff. They're having a wonderful time, kind of drunk on the Seep, because the aliens just want to observe what it's like to be human. And our main character, whose name I've forgotten, Trina, is a 50-year-old trans woman, and when the Seep comes, after a bit, her wife says that she wants to be reborn. She wants to become a baby again, and basically be brought up without any of the trauma that she had in her childhood. And Trina says, I don't know how comfortable I am with that idea. I love you as you are. Please don't become a baby again. And her wife sort of says, no, this is what I want to do. So Trina says, I think we need to break up. So the book is sort of a breakup story, but set in this very odd world. This is sort of what I wanted the Book of M to be. I thought this was really wonderfully written. It's very weird, but less weird than I was expecting it to be, given the start. If you get past that as the catalyst for change in the story, the rest of it flows on quite beautifully. And yeah, I thought it was a really lovely book about healing and emotion and so such. Sorry, the washing machine is just very intense at the moment. I would highly recommend this. I think it's a really good book, and I thought the audiobook was phenomenal. If you were looking for a quick audiobook to get you through a couple of hours on a car journey or something, would be worth reading. More Orbit things. This is the Jasmine Throne. This is out in June. So we have the Princess Malini, who is captured in a big, or what used to be a big temple, and also we have a ex-priestess, a vengeful priestess seeking to steal the throne is how she's worded on the back, but she's more somebody who grew up in this temple that then she really ought to be dead, so nobody can know that she is connected to this temple, and they end up being pushed together because obviously that's how plots work, and there's a rebellion happening, but also again healing and stuff, and it's sort of sapphic, and I really loved this, and I'm doing it a huge disservice in the way that I explain it. Two women, an imprisoned princess and a servant in possession of forbidden magic, come together to rewrite their fates. That's all you need to know. This is wonderful. It is much less romance-focused than I was expecting, and given how much I criticised The Wolf and the Woodsman for being too romance-focused, I think that maybe this, for me, went slightly the other way, but my suspicion is that with the sequel added on as well, that'll balance out, and it's just the first book thing of, if the romance had been more in this book, it probably would have been too much. I highly enjoyed this. I think the world building is fantastic. I think that the writing is beautiful. The plot is great. I was pleased to find there are more point of view characters than just the two of them. I think it adds to that whole shape of the world and a bit more dramatic irony, and yeah, would definitely recommend if you're looking for something to read in June. Would be a good book club book as well, I'm just saying. After that was my reread of The Lie Tree by Frances Hardinge. This was a week where I read all sorts of things all at once, so forgive me if these get jumbled. But this is sort of a Victorian Gothic kind of story about a young girl called Faith whose family, because of her father, have to move to this isolated island called Vane. In theory, for her father to be part of this dig, but he ends up not being part of the dig and instead gets murdered, and Faith discovers his body. And the story is about this lie tree, this plant that her father has discovered, and I don't want to talk about it too much, but it's just gloriously spooky in that way that only Frances Hardinge can pull off. The murder mystery aspect of it is wonderfully written. The mystery really works. I'd forgotten a lot about that aspect of it and who actually did the deed. Absolutely wonderful, hugely wonderfully gothic. Yes, put it on your lists for your Halloween reading. Great. I'm going to put these together even though I didn't actually read them back to back, but I did read Viper and Venom by Bex Hogan. These are the first two books in the Isles of Storm and Sorrow series. I'm going to hold up one of them because I'm sensible. Reading book one on its own, I was less than convinced. Adding in book two, I enjoyed it a lot more. I think what I've come down to on these is that there are just too many things going on for me personally. There's a lot of different ideas and world building aspects and storytelling things happening. It all just comes together and it's a bit like, okay, I can't deal with all of these things. Pick one, you know. We're following one thread of this story. She cannot be all of these things at once. And I think the fact that it's first-person narrative does it a disservice in that aspect, because you only get her feelings on it and her emotions, and you don't really see how that has an impact on the wider setting. So less than 100% on this one, but the way that book 2 ended, I now need to read book 3. So there's that. Another book that did not do too much for me, For the Wolf. I'm so disappointed in this. I thought I was going to like this. I had an inkling like maybe foresty, a bit of romance, I can get on board, but this is another wolf-based book that let me down this month. So in this world, your firstborn daughter, she's your daughter, she's gonna rule, that's all wonderful, and the second daughter gets basically dumped off in the woods for the wolf to deal with. The wolf is actually a man. This is the basic plot. What I didn't love is that the beginning of this book just felt like Uprooted by Naomi Novik, which, I mean, it's a good book, but I didn't need to read it again. And then I was talking to Ash about this, and just the romance for it fell completely flat for me. There felt like there was absolutely zero tension, both in terms of we need to stop bad things happening, and also, gosh, you're attractive, but I have complicated feelings about this. It just felt like they fell at each other and sort of flumped onto the floor, and it was like, well, there you go. This was a book. And yeah, just a bit boring, to be honest. I don't think I would recommend this, which is such a shame, because as I say, Orbit have been bringing out such good stuff lately. This wasn't it. I finished A Face Like Glass, which was another Frances Hardinge reread, and I absolutely adored it. I think this might be one of my favourites. It's not as good as... It's very different from Deep Light. This is the intricate world building that I love, and the weird world building. So, Caverna, underground city, people in it make magical stuff like wine and magical cheese and magical perfume and so such, but they never leave, and they all live to 25-hour clocks. Neverfell, our main character, is found at age 5 swimming around in the cheese curds of an artisanal cheesemaker. He adopts her and makes her wear a mask the whole time. Anytime she's seen by anyone, she's opening the door, she has to wear this mask, and she doesn't know why. In the way of Frances Hardinge heroines, falls into a wider political thing that's happening, and basically you follow her uncovering this mystery. And it's one of the things I really love is Neverfell starts off as this very naive character, much like we saw in earlier books, but she really grows. Unwillingness to accept things as they are if they feel wrong is really interesting as a character trait, and I don't think I've ever read a character that I have felt the same way about. There's a lot of young adult and middle grade heroines that you just think, yes, I would have wanted to be you when I grew up. Neverfell is one of those characters, and also just, even if you didn't want to be her, is just interesting to read. And yes, I like it. I like it a lot. You should read it, just for the world building alone. Alright, my last two things are shorter things and things I definitely wasn't anticipating in reading, and I was debating not including them on the list, because as you know, I'm not tracking my reading anywhere online. I'm not overly fussed about quantifying it all at the moment. That's being said, I'm about to come on to numbers. I wanted Katie to read them, so we had them as audiobooks on the car journey up and back from my parents. So we did A Dead Djinn in Cairo, which, as you know, I love. It's a short story. It's absolutely wonderful. And then on the way back, just today, we did The Haunting of Tramcar 015. Both of them are fantastic. I've talked about them at length on this channel. Master of Djinn I've talked about very recently. They're just all so good. Really wonderful audiobooks. Again, perfect for a car journey. Great mystery stories. I definitely appreciated the humour of the second one more this time around, if you just want what changed this time around for me. I hadn't listened to them since before reading Master of Djinn, and coming out the other side, it didn't change much for me, but I think that's a good thing in the sense of reading them in any order. It doesn't really make a difference. They're just three kind of distinct stories. So yeah, those are my 20 things for this month. I'm going to try and see if I can, without going and getting my laptop out, work out how many books are left on my TBR. I've also read one chapter of the book on the history of the issues in Palestine, but I have not read enough of it to comment on it yet, and I am halfway through She Who Became the Sun. But those are things I haven't finished yet, so they will be in my June wrap-up. Oh, I didn't write that down. I finished that as well. I'll talk about that in a second. In fact, I'll do that now and I'll edit around it. I finished Blackwater Sister by Zen Cho. I forgot. But I did finish that when I was at my parents' as well. This features a girl who, her family moves back to Malaysia and she goes with them, and she starts hearing the voice of her dead grandmother in her mind, and her grandmother saying, you need to deal with this problem so that I can pass on. And it's sort of a story of gods and the meeting of gods in the modern day, and the kind of intersection of superstition and myth and reality that exists in a lot of parts of the world. It's very, very good. It's very fast-paced. It's very interesting. It brings in a lot of ideas that I hadn't really heard of before. I liked the main character a lot. Some of it felt like it went by too quickly for me, but that might be because I was sat quite comfortably in the sunshine reading away. I don't know if that was the reason. But yes, I would actually recommend it. I definitely would. I liked it a lot more than Sorcerer to the Throne. Her Regency Fae kind of story. I liked this one a lot more. Oh, look, I can knock so many of these off. I read that one. I read that one. I read that one. Have I read those? No, I think that's everything. My TBR is currently at 35 books, and one of those is more of a magazine. So, feeling very good about going into my book a day in June reading challenge. Hopefully, we can get that down to under 10, I think. That would be good. Oh, maybe I'm missing one. Under 10. Okay, this is rough numbers. I'm not going to go in and fine-tooth comb check them. Rough numbers, I'd like to get it to under 10 by the end of the next month. That was everything that I read in the month of June. What have you been reading? What was your top book of June? I think my favourite non-reread might have been The House of Always. And my favourite of the rereads was A Face Like Glass, because I just had a wonderful time doing it. So what was that for you? What was your least favourite book? I think mine was probably For the Wolf, just in terms of like, why does this exist? I don't care. So sorry if you're watching this and you loved that, but that's how I feel. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can follow me on all of my social media, that's linked below. Come join us on Discord. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. Merlina? Oh, come on, Judith, you can remember people's names. The shelves are dusty.